welcome to EHA Unplugged, the official podcast channel of the European Hematology Association, EHA.
Hello, I am Isabel Olivera, your host for EHA. In this Hematology Portrait series, we are exploring the world of hematology through conversations about the career with leading experts in the field. Today, we have the privilege to have Professor Antonio Almeida. He's the current president of EHA, but he has many other hats. He's the head of the hematology department at Hospital da Luz in Portugal, and he's the founding dean of Católica Medical School in Lisbon, Portugal. So in this episode, we're going to talk about his career, his involvement with EHA, and his vision for the future of the field. Thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So you are both a clinician, a researcher, and an educator. I imagine getting all those titles took some time. Can you tell us, along this education path, when did you get interested in hematology first?
So I trained in the UK. I'm Portuguese originally, and I studied in English-speaking schools because my father was a mining engineer and we traveled quite a lot. And the English-speaking system is disseminated all over the world, and it was easy to change schools without losing years. So when I finished my English-speaking education, I went to university in the UK. I trained at Cambridge and then did my specialist training in London. So that basically took about 10, 12 years until the end of that. And by the time I'd finished medical school, in the UK, we did 2 years of internal medicine and general medicine. I did 6 months in a hematology ward. And to be honest, I'd never really thought of hematology as a specialty. We don't have much contact with it in medical school. I didn't have much contact with it in other areas of my work. And I was fascinated by several aspects. Probably the first aspect is the contact we had with patients. So when you do internal medicine or you do emergency medicine, patients come in and out, they have an infection, they leave, they have an acute event, and they go. Whereas in hematology, you follow patients for a long time, even as a junior doctor. And so the whole contact with the disease, with the patient, becomes much more intense and very rewarding. The second aspect which always fascinated me was the laboratory side. So to be able to be a clinician, see patients, but also be actively involved in the diagnosis, in reading bone marrows, reading blood films, but also involved in all the other auxiliary tests such as flow cytometry, special enzyme tests were very, very fascinating. And the third thing that I really enjoyed was that hematology covers a huge breadth of topics. So we have obviously oncological diseases, myeloma, leukemia, etc. But we also have non-malignant disorders such as sickle cell disease, and then we have all the clotting disorders. And all this breadth made it very, very interesting. And that's when I really wanted to do hematology. And so when I finished that and started specialist training, I went straight into hematology. And I was very fortunate to get a rotation in North Thames, which is the Hammersmith rotation. And I worked with fantastic experts who taught me morphology, who taught me bone marrow transplantation, acute care of leukemia, and sickle cell disease, all within these 5 years of training.
How did you become interested in myeloid neoplasms in particular?
Well, life takes some funny turns. So when I was doing my specialist training in the UK, I very much focused on sickle cell disease. That was the disease I was very interested in. I did a lot of training in red cell disorders, and I actually worked for about a year in one of the biggest sickle cell centers in Europe, which is Guy's in St. Thomas's. And I then did my PhD in the UK in a very specific inherited disease. And at one stage, very much for personal reasons, I wanted to go back to Portugal. And when I looked at jobs in Portugal and I applied for jobs, the only job that was available was at the Institute of Oncology, which, as the name indicates, did not have sickle cell disease. And so when I arrived at the Institute of Oncology, and they said, "Oh, what do you like?" And I said, "I like anemia." And they said, "Oh, really? Oh, you must do all the MDSs then." So I started off by building up a myelodysplastic syndrome practice because of my interest in anemia. At the same time, in the same hospital, they said, oh, you've been to the Hammersmith, and the Hammersmith is a big CML center, so you should probably take the CML patients as well. So a little bit by serendipity and a little bit also by personal taste, I started getting involved with myeloproliferative neoplasms and chronic myeloid neoplasms, really. So MDS, CML, and Philadelphia negative neoplasms. And they're diseases that really fascinate me because within the same mutation and the same genetic profile, you get such a huge clinical variety. And actually, they are diseases which are not acute, but have a tendency to be acute. So you follow them as outpatients, and there are many, many novel, exciting therapies to be had. And they all have this very interesting characteristic, which is, in general, they have a single or more genetic lesions that lead to a phenotype. So the correlation of genotype with phenotype is always present, which makes them very interesting diseases to follow.
And as you said, most of these diseases are chronic or take a long time. So it builds in with your interest of seeing patients for a long time.
Yes, I mean, you follow them for a long time. They have directed therapies, which means that there's a huge satisfaction in treating the patients and obtaining results. But also, I think one of the things that is nice is that patients obviously are ill, but they're not acutely sick. And so the whole establishing a relationship in a way that you work with them is a little bit different from an acutely sick patient on a ward. And I prefer that personally.
So you still see patients until today?
Yes. I came back from the UK in 2006 and worked in the Institute of Oncology for 11 years. And in 2017, I moved to my current hospital, which is a big general university hospital called Hospital da Luz, where I built a hematology service from scratch. And so we're now 6 hematologists, and we do everything from non-malignant to malignant. We don't have transplantation. We do laboratory, so I do my own bone marrows and report my own bone marrows, and I still see patients. I don't have as focused clinics as I did in my previous job. My clinics are more general and include a little bit of everything, but I do focus mostly on myeloid neoplasms.
So you managed to go back to other aspects of hematology also.
Yes, exactly. So I've started doing non-malignant diseases again, which I very much enjoy.
And you are also very involved in education. You are the dean of university. You were involved in funding. How did you get so interested in education?
I mean, education has always been a sort of activity I enjoyed. Yeah, ever since I was a junior doctor, I lectured in various courses, mainly about red cell disorders, and I was involved also in courses in preparation for the entry exam to the specialty in the UK, teaching hematology. So I've always enjoyed education. But I must say the big step for me in my educationalist role was with EHA. I was part of the initial group that set up the masterclass of EHA. And in that initial group, we had fascinating people such as Gunnar Birgegaard and Janet Strivens, who were educationalists in the pure sense of the word, and really brought in modern education concepts such as peer-to-peer learning, problem-based learning, sequenced repetition. And it was fascinating setting up these clinical cases and setting up a system in which junior doctors could use clinical cases for peer-to-peer learning and would have a mentor that was very non-interventional, but monitored and guided them through their paths. And so this really brought me into the world of education. And at one stage, I was invited by the Portuguese Catholic University, which is who I work for, to start a new medical school. So they had quite an exciting partnership with the University of Maastricht, which is quite a forward-thinking university in terms of education and medical education. And we implemented a curriculum that is very much focused on teaching by system, so integrated teaching, and using problem-based learning and student-centered learning as an objective. So our students have clinical skills from the first year, but they also have clinical reasoning from the first year, solving problems and spiraling up their knowledge throughout the years into their clinical years. And it's been a very, very exciting project. very challenging because, as the dean of the school, you're not only involved in the educational side, but you're also involved in all the management and all these things that really take you out of your comfort zone. But also it's very exciting to see not only how the project grows and how people get involved and buy in, but also how the students are excited by this way of learning, how they really enjoy learning in this way, how it becomes much more of an adventure rather than the conventional learning that we have in which they need to learn things off by heart to go to an exam. And I've always been involved in postgraduate training, and gradually I've been bringing more and more of these participative and student-centered techniques into my training programs to make them more interesting and also more effective in terms of educational experiences.
So you have already touched on how you became an active member of EHA because you came to EHA through the education field. You got involved in the education department, but now you're the president. How have you evolved within the association?
Well, I think the first thing I must say is that EHA has brought me an awful lot. I mean, it really has been a key player in all the competences that I have acquired throughout my career and also in developing my career. So I've been involved in the EHA for a long time, even before in my more active participation. I've always gone to EHA congresses. From my first year as a trainee, I went to present things at the EHA congresses. I was invited to specialist groups on red cell disorders by my mentors, by Professor Sally Davis and other mentors that I had in the UK. So there was a lot of involvement. But at one stage when I got back to Portugal, there was a call and my head of department said, they want someone to pilot the masterclass. Would you like to be part of this pilot? And I said yes. And so we had a very interesting group, which was really part of the curriculum committee at the time, in which we started this masterclass pilot as a good educational activity. But at the same time, my involvement in the masterclass led to me being invited to be part of the curriculum committee. And in that, I was part of revamping the curriculum and revising one of the versions, and also implementing the European exam. So all of these activities made me more and more active within EHA. And so I did a lot of educational activities and obviously spoke at meetings and helped out a lot until one point in 2019, I was elected onto the board. And as a board member, I also became head of the sponsor and fundraising committee, which is a very interesting experience because it's much less educational, but you bring all that educational and clinical side into speaking with sponsors and trying to see the value of EHA and show the value of EHA in what is very much a business world. I think it's very clear that sponsors want the visibility that EHA has. And also they want to collaborate and to become more involved in the hematology world. So that opportunity was very exciting. Through my involvement with the board, I was very much encouraged by John Gribben to run for president, and I was very lucky to be elected.
So as president of EHA, what would be the most significant challenges you see in hematology at the moment?
Well, hematology is such a diverse subject that it's very difficult to identify one challenge. Perhaps the biggest challenge is to have a united and concerted description and vision of what hematology is. Because we treat, as I said, malignant and non-malignant disorders. We treat red cell clotting, white cell disorders. We are involved in diagnostics. We're involved in blood transfusion. And so the breadth of this is not to be underestimated. And it's not the same in every country. Different countries in Europe have different concepts of what hematologists are and what hematologists do. And so the biggest challenge that we have is that maintaining hematology as a subject, also being able to cater for all the needs that other hematologists have. I think the second big challenge is that we are a very expensive specialty because we've been so progressive in our scientific research as a community. Many of our patients and many of the diseases that we treat have very well characterized genetic profiles and protein profiles, and therefore many of them have very directed therapies. small molecule inhibitors, immunotherapies. And this also means that the cost of these therapies is huge. And so access is a big challenge. And I think we need to think carefully in the future of how we really have fair access for everybody, not only to treatment, but also to the diagnostics without which we cannot get treatment. And and I think EHA has done an awful lot for that. We do a lot in terms of education and in terms of harmonizing education. We promote a lot of research through dedicated mentorship programs, but also through research grants. And I think this vision that we have of promoting hematology and improving the knowledge of the community also goes a long way towards ensuring access to treatment and diagnostics, and also ensuring that people see hematology in all the glory that it is.
So if you could magically solve one of these major challenges overnight, which one would you choose?
Oh, I think that the biggest challenge to magically solve would be access. I think solving access to diagnostics and medication has a very direct impact on patients, but it also has a very direct impact on how healthcare workers can provide the care that they want for their patients. And I think the more you are able to have adequate diagnostics, the more you're able to characterize diseases, the more you're able to have better treatments. And solving that issue would really be of huge benefit to everybody.
So you're managing all these responsibilities. What do you enjoy the most in an everyday basis?
Well, it's difficult to say that I enjoy one thing more than another. I love seeing patients, and I have a very fulfilling clinical life in both in terms of diagnosis, but also in following patients and in treating patients. And I love education, and I think education is very much part of patient care, and being able to follow and set up and actually see students enjoy medicine and develop a passion for medicine and not just an obligation and another job is something that's very, very gratifying. Having said that, the umbrella position that I have within EHA also gives me a very different vision and a very different way of looking at things, and also of being able to help and to solve problems that hematologists have in their day-to-day life. So probably the most gratifying thing I could say is really that I have the possibility through very different roles, education, clinical, as in working for an association, to bring out this passion for hematology in various people, and to really help develop hematology and benefit both those who work in it and the patients.
So what advice would you give a young medical student that is choosing now their path?
Well, I think the biggest advice I can give is be open. Things happen in life, paths change, and if you're set on one idea, you may not see other different ideas that are there. So be open and be available and take up challenges that are given to you, because they may open doors that you'd never imagine. I mean, I never imagined starting off in the masterclass and finishing up as EHA president. And I never imagined starting in education and finishing up as a dean. So these opportunities that are put in our paths are there to be grabbed and to be enjoyed. Secondly, I think it's very important to enjoy what you do. Yes, life is hard. Yes, life as a doctor is hard, and there are many sleepless nights, and there are many difficult moments, and there are many challenges along the way. But we need to keep the passion for what we do alive, and we need to enjoy the path as we go along and not just be worried with the next exam and the next challenge.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Almeida, for this insightful conversation and for sharing your valuable experience with us. Thank you to all of you for listening, and stay tuned for our next episodes.